Hello students. In this video we shall come to know about how user-defined functions are created. As I told you, the user-defined functions can be either static or either non-static. So we shall try to create both the type of methods in this program, and we will also see how these two functions are called. Secondly, we shall see how these functions are actually called with respect to different arguments. We shall see the return type of these functions too. So these three things are very much important: how static and non-static functions behave, how they are called, how the arguments are passed, and finally how the values are being returned. So we shall see all these things in this video. So let us suppose I want to create a method void, a simple method called me. If this is a method, I have not mentioned static before it, so that means this method is actually a class method, an instance method, right? The static methods are rather the class methods. So if I have made this function, I have not written anything, so can I call this function within main? So if I try to call this function within main, it will show you an error. Let's run this program, and the error will give you knowledge. It says non-static method call me cannot be referenced from a static context. So this gives you a rule of calling the methods, that a static method cannot call a non-static function. Suppose I declare one more function, void call main 2, and I make it static. So if there is a function but that is static, and if main tries to call me 2, because it was static, it will be able to call it. Let us save this program and run it. So it is giving you no error, because right now I am following the rule that a static function can call only static functions, and a non-static function can be called by a non-static function. So how this call me function, which is non-static in nature, can be called in a static context? And we had seen in the first videos, when I had given you a glimpse of the structure of Java program, that a non-static function can be called with reference to the object. So we'll have to create an object of this class in order to call me function. So how this object can be created? I'll write one ob is equal to new 1. So an object of this class has been created. Now that I can make use of ob.callme. This is how a non-static function can be called with reference to the objects. So as it has not given you an error, so you have learnt a rule that a static function can be called from a static context only, and the non-static function can be called with reference to the objects only. Now let us come to the arguments part. So if suppose this call me function is having one argument as int. Now if this is an argument declared as an argument list to this function, means that whenever you try to call this function call me, you will have to pass on one integer value at least. So as you call it, I will have to pass this any integer value. So as you call it, so let us process this too. So what I do it, I try to make changes into it. I make it 200. So what I am doing is I am passing 100. This 100 is passed on to a, and I try to make change into this a. Now what will happen? This a will be 200, but does it affect this argument? How can it? Because 100 is an integer literal. So you can have this subtle difference if you try to store this value into a variable. So instead of passing the literal, I can pass I to it. So this is how a value can be passed as a literal or by storing the value into a variable. So now you will have to imagine that if this I is earlier storing 100 and I passed on this I to this function, the value of I is copied into A and this A is modified inside call me. So does it affect I? You will see that it does not, because Java passed all the arguments by values only. So this is a rule you will have to learn it. Unlike C and C++, where the variables can be passed with reference as well as with pointers, Java passes only values. So let us see how the output actually gives you. As you see, the value is still 100. Even I have passed this value to this function which is changing the value, but once I return from this function call, I try to check my original value, it is still giving me 100. So that means once you are passing this value, this A is actually a local copy of this particular variable, and A is called as a local variable right now, and this way you will not be able to make changes into it. Now let us see what is the return type. So in the case of return type, I have only made use of void only. So let us change this void into a return type. You will need to remember that every function returns a single value. That's why a single return type is written. So by writing int here, it means that this call me function will actually return a value. Return value to whom? It will return a value to the function which calls it. So as I have called up this call me function inside main, so this main can receive the value once this call me is called. So if a function is returning any value, so once it is being called, there are two ways to get the value that is being returned. One way that you can directly save it. So if you write this function call like this, so this function, whatsoever value it will return, that will be saved in J, and further you can process this J, like I can print this J. But in order to return this value, you will have to make use of a return statement too. So this function, which was earlier not having any return statement, is now bound to have a return value, because it is in the definition, it is saying that it is going to return an integer value to its caller. So I can return, suppose I return A into it. So what I've done is I have passed I, which was storing 100, A was containing 100. So what I do it, I make use of, suppose, this operator. So what this operator says, whatsoever value it actually receives, it adds 100 into it and will return the new value. So the new value is being saved in J and the J is being printed. So let us see the impact of this functionality. You will see it is 200. So the function which it returns 200, you pass on any value, pass on suppose 250. So any value that is being passed will be adding 100 into it, and the new value is going to be returned. So now it is 350. So this way you can return a value from a function. That is one very important property of a function, is that it can have a variable number of arguments. The variable number, what do we mean by a variable number of arguments? Like this function call me, once I say in the argument list that it is containing int A, that means it will be passed only a single value. So what if I want to call it by passing multiple values. So can I have a call like this, int k is equal to ob dot call me, and by passing I comma I plus 1. What do we mean by this? This function, earlier it was being passed one value, and now that it is being passed two values. So how can it be possible? This can be made possible by making use of the variable argument list, and that is applied by this one. We will write int followed by triple dots and the name of the argument. Now that this A will actually treat all these elements as an array, and they will be saved into this array list. So if I pass a single element, that will be passed in A0. If I pass on two elements, they will be passed in 0 and 1. So suppose what I need to do right now, that means if I am having A treated as an array, I will have to treat it like this. So what I need to return, suppose I want to return the sum of all the elements which are being passed. So in that case, I will have to process this array. So let us process this array. Int I is equal to 0, I is less than a dot length, and I plus plus. I can make use of this sum variable and add a of I to it. So let us declare this sum variable too, which is declared and defined as 0 earlier. So all the values which will be passed on, they will be taken one by one and they will be added to sum, and finally the new sum that will be returned. So now let us call this function with respect to k2. Let us print the value k. Let us just define this so that you may be I will write j is equal to the value j, and here I will write k is equal to k, not comma, is the plus one. Let us run this program. And just see the behavior of this function. As you can see, the j is 250 because I had passed only one value 250, and k is 501. So this thing was not earlier possible when we were passing a single list, a single element. Now that our function call me is behaving in two different ways. If I pass on a different argument list, it will be giving me an output like this. I can also call this function directly. As you have seen, once I call this function, the value being returned is saved into just j or in k. What I can do is I can directly call this function by passing a list. As many values you can pass in, and you can see the output like this. So without storing the value being returned by call me, what I am doing is I am directly printing them. So you can either save this value or either you can directly print it. Let us run this program and let us see how it performs. Now that it is still giving you the value. Well, that means you can call this function in any way possible. Even you can pass this value being returned to another function, right? If another function is expecting an integer value to be returned, you can pass the whole value to this one. Like for example, you may use System.out.println, and suppose I want to do what? Make use of math dot square root. So suppose I want to calculate the square root of a value. So what's more important into it is I want to calculate the square root of the maximum of the two values, right? So how to calculate the maximum? So in order to calculate the maximum, we'll have to make use of max method. So what I'll do is inside square root, I will make a call to this max method right here. Suppose I say 12.123.34, 123.345. So the maximum value out of these two will be returned by this max function, and the same value will be passed on to square root. So what I have done is I have made a chain of function calls. So you may actually call these functions in the argument list too. Let us see this program. There is semicolon missing. Let's make it and let us run it. It gives you. Now why it has not resulted a value? Let us check it. Let's run this program, compile it again and run it. Now this way you have got the square root of the value that is greater than the true values, and you have made a call to this function square root by passing another function into it. So this is all about how the functions are declared, called, pass the values, and also we have discussed about how a variable argument list is passed to a function. So let's meet into the next video where we shall understand a new quality of classes and objects, which is called as method overloading. So till then, goodbye.